The Israel-Palestine conflict is one of the most enduring and complex conflicts in modern history. Marked by decades of violence, displacement, and political deadlock, the conflict's roots run deep into the 20th century. To truly grasp the current situation and explore potential paths toward peace, a nuanced understanding of the historical context is crucial. This essay delves into the key events that have shaped the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, from the British Mandate period to the present day. By examining the historical forces at play, the decisions made, and their consequences, we can gain valuable insights into the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. This exploration is not about assigning blame or perpetuating narratives of victimhood. Instead, it seeks to illuminate the historical injustices, political complexities, and human stories that have contributed to the current impasse. By acknowledging the past, we can begin to build a more informed and empathetic understanding of the conflict, one that recognizes the shared humanity of both Israelis and Palestinians. This understanding is essential for fostering dialogue, promoting reconciliation, and ultimately working towards a just and lasting peace. The seeds of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict were sown during the British Mandate for Palestine, spanning from 1920 to 1948. This period was marked by significant political and social changes that would shape the future of the region. Following World War I, the League of Nations entrusted Great Britain with the administration of Palestine, a territory with a long and rich history and a diverse population of Arabs and Jews. The mandate was intended to prepare the region for self-governance, but it also brought with it a host of challenges and conflicts. The British were tasked with facilitating the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people, as declared in the Balfour Declaration of 1917. This declaration was a pivotal moment, promising support for the Zionist movement, while also attempting to safeguard the rights of the existing non-Jewish communities. This declaration, while acknowledging the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities, created a fundamental tension between the aspirations of the Zionist movement for a Jewish state and the rights of the Arab population, who made up the vast majority of Palestine's inhabitants. The conflicting promises and expectations set the stage for a complex and often contentious relationship. During the Mandate period, Jewish immigration to Palestine increased significantly, fueled in part by the rise of anti-Semitism in Europe. The influx of Jewish immigrants brought new energy and resources to the region, but it also heightened fears and anxieties among the Arab population. This influx of Jewish immigrants, many of whom sought refuge from persecution, led to growing tensions with the Arab population, who feared being displaced from their land and losing their political and economic power. The demographic changes were rapid and profound, altering the social fabric of Palestine. The British administration struggled to balance the competing demands of the two communities, and their policies often exacerbated tensions. Efforts to placate both sides frequently resulted in dissatisfaction and unrest, as neither community felt their needs were being adequately addressed. As both sides felt increasingly marginalized and their aspirations ignored, the stage was set for conflict. The British Mandate period was thus characterized by a series of escalating confrontations, protests, and violent clashes, laying the groundwork for the enduring conflict that would follow. The legacy of this era continues to influence the dynamics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to this day. In 1947, recognizing the unsustainability of their mandate and facing mounting pressure to resolve the situation, the British government referred the question of Palestine's future to the newly formed United Nations. This decision came after years of escalating tensions and violence between Jewish and Arab communities in the region, making it clear that a new approach was necessary. The UN proposed a partition plan, dividing the territory into two states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem designated as a special international zone. This international zone was intended to ensure that the Holy City, significant to Jews, Christians, and Muslims alike, would be accessible to all and not fall under the exclusive control of any one group. This plan, while imperfect, represented an attempt to find a compromise solution. It was a complex and contentious proposal, reflecting the deep-seated historical, religious, and cultural ties each group had to the land. The Jewish leadership accepted the partition plan, albeit reluctantly, seeing it as a pragmatic step towards statehood. They recognized the opportunity to establish a sovereign nation, a long-held aspiration for the Jewish people, especially in the aftermath of the Holocaust. However, the Arab leadership vehemently rejected the plan, viewing it as an unjust dispossession of their homeland. They felt that the plan unfairly favored the Jewish population, who were recent arrivals compared to the long-established Arab communities. The proposed division allocated 55% of the land to the Jewish state, despite Jews only making up roughly 30% of the population at the time. This disproportionate allocation was seen as a major grievance by the Arab population, who felt marginalized and disenfranchised. This perceived injustice, coupled with the displacement of Palestinians from their homes and land, solidified Arab opposition to the partition plan. Many Palestinians were forced to leave their ancestral homes, leading to a deep sense of loss and anger that would fuel future conflicts. The rejection of the partition plan plunged the region into chaos and violence. Clashes between Jewish and Arab communities escalated, leading to widespread unrest and bloodshed. As the British Mandate ended in May 1948 and Israel declared its independence, neighboring Arab states intervened, marking the beginning of the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. This war was a pivotal moment in the history of the region, as it set the stage for decades of conflict and instability. This war, which resulted in a decisive Israeli victory, had a profound impact on the demographics and geography of the region. The boundaries of the newly established State of Israel expanded significantly, altering the political landscape. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from their homes, becoming refugees in neighboring countries. This mass displacement created a humanitarian crisis and sowed the seeds of future conflicts, as displaced Palestinians and their descendants continued to seek the right to return to their homeland. The war also expanded the territory under Israeli control beyond the borders outlined in the UN partition plan. This expansion further complicated the prospects for peace, as it created new realities on the ground that would be difficult to reverse in future negotiations. The 1948 war was just the first in a series of conflicts that would come to define the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This war, also known as the War of Independence in Israel and the Nakba, or catastrophe, by Palestinians, resulted in the establishment of the State of Israel and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The aftermath of this war set the stage for decades of tension, violence, and political strife in the region. The Six-Day War of 1967, which saw Israel capture the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights, further altered the geopolitical landscape. This brief but intense conflict dramatically shifted the balance of power in the Middle East. Israel's swift and decisive victory expanded its territory significantly, but also brought millions of Palestinians under Israeli control, creating a complex and volatile situation that persists to this day. This victory, while celebrated in Israel, resulted in the military occupation of Palestinian territories and further displacement of Palestinian populations. For Israelis, the war was a moment of national pride and security, but for Palestinians, it marked the beginning of a prolonged and oppressive occupation. The displacement of Palestinian families and the establishment of Israeli military rule in these areas led to widespread hardship and resentment. The occupation of the West Bank and Gaza Strip had a profound impact on Palestinian society. The daily lives of Palestinians were disrupted by military checkpoints, curfews, and restrictions on movement. Economic development was stifled as access to resources and markets was severely limited. Social and political structures were also affected, as the occupation imposed new governance systems that often clashed with traditional Palestinian leadership. Israel's control over movement, resources, and governance restricted Palestinian political, economic, and social development. The construction of barriers and checkpoints fragmented Palestinian communities, making it difficult for people to travel for work, education, or medical care. The control over water resources and agricultural land further hindered economic growth, while the imposition of Israeli laws and regulations undermined Palestinian self-governance. The establishment of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories, considered illegal under international law, further exacerbated tensions. These settlements, often built on land expropriated from Palestinians, were seen as a direct challenge to the possibility of a future Palestinian state. The presence of settlers, who were often heavily armed and protected by the Israeli military, led to frequent clashes and violence. These settlements, viewed by many as an obstacle to peace, fueled Palestinian resentment and undermined the viability of a future Palestinian state. The expansion of settlements not only took away land that Palestinians hoped to include in their own state, but also created a network of roads and infrastructure that further divided Palestinian territories. This fragmentation made it increasingly difficult to envision a contiguous and sovereign Palestinian state. The decades following the Six-Day War witnessed ongoing cycles of violence, resistance, and repression. Palestinian resistance took many forms, from armed struggle to civil disobedience, while Israeli responses ranged from military operations to economic sanctions. Each cycle of violence left deep scars on both societies, perpetuating a cycle of mistrust and hostility. The First Intifada, a Palestinian uprising that began in 1987, brought the plight of Palestinians living under occupation to international attention. This grassroots movement, characterized by widespread protests, strikes, and boycotts, was a powerful expression of Palestinian frustration and anger. The images of young Palestinians confronting heavily armed Israeli soldiers captured the world's attention and highlighted the asymmetry of the conflict. This largely non-violent uprising, met with often brutal force by the Israeli military, highlighted the human cost of the conflict and the urgent need for a just and lasting solution. The international community began to take a more active interest in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, leading to increased diplomatic efforts to find a resolution. However, despite numerous peace initiatives and negotiations, a lasting solution has remained elusive, and the cycle of conflict continues to shape the lives of millions in the region.